The third branch in life being a messy, rotten business is, the truth is, there is no self. The self is an illusion. So let's expand on that. All of us in this class have a unique temperament to us. I assure you, you had no business in giving yourself that temperament. You were just born with it. Your parents, you didn't choose them. Your birth, you didn't choose it. Your birth in a specific time in history, you didn't choose that. If you were living in Mexico and your father was never home, you wouldn't have father issues because that culture doesn't create those narratives. If you were in Saudi Arabia, you would never raise your hand and say stupid things in class, because the elements of shame and guilt and reputation are far too great. They will hold you back. We are nothing but the product of our environment. Watch that movie with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, Trading Places. Eddie Murphy is homeless. Dan Aykroyd is like a vice president of a company, and two old men in a bathroom make a bet. They can change lives. They can change personalities. They can change history, narrative, psychology very, very easily. Let's fire our VP and in his place put Eddie Murphy, the homeless man. That's what they do. If you live in America, you want a 90-inch TV. If you live in Denmark, they're quite happy with a 32-inch. If you live in Norway, should you make more than $80,000, 60% of your income will go towards taxes. So if you make 60,000, you make more. You bring home more than someone who makes 90. And all of a sudden you realize the greed that exists in people who live in Norway is very, very different than the greed that lives inside people in America. If you have hurt feelings because of a man or a woman leaving you, imagine if you lived with a man or a woman who were good to you. You would have a completely different set of emotions. All of us in this class are nothing but accidents. And these accidental little creatures called human beings pursue things, demand things, depending on where they are, where they've been born, and what their life experiences have been. Change people's experiences and you will change them. Sometimes I get people in my classes and they say, I have an issue. I say, no, I don't want to give you my ears about your issue unless you're willing to understand the whole of life. I don't care about your troubles with your boyfriend, your pathetic problems with not being able to write essays. It has to do with reflecting, with thinking, with understanding. That's the big picture you need to capture. So why is life suffering then? All of us in this class think very highly of ourselves. You take your boredom far too seriously. You take your disagreements far too seriously. You take your knowledge far too seriously. There is nothing permanent about you. You're not dependable in any way. And for those of you who are in a relationship, know this about your companion. They are not dependable. Why? They are subject to change. Nothing is permanent. And you will not like the changes that happen. And those changes will lead to dissatisfaction. Imagine if you truly believe that there is no self. There'd be no need for therapists. You wouldn't have greed. You wouldn't whine and cry all the time like stupid animal that we are. You wouldn't take yourself too seriously. See, if people understand these ideas, they wouldn't be as damaged as they are today. 3,000 years ago. So instead of, for those in this class who like to think about things, instead of spending your valuable money buying self-help books, just Google the Four Noble Truths and study them for the next 50 years. That's all you need to do. Just devote yourself to that. So let's go back and just bullet the first noble truth. Life is bad. But remember, life is not really bad. It's bad because of our lack of understanding. We make life bad for 3 reasons. You're looking for permanence in an environment that has no permanence. It doesn't know what permanence is. You want happiness, contentment, and joy in a place that can't offer you those things. And we are nothing but a collection of narratives, social, political, our own imaginations, experiences. That's all. So how do you summarize the first noble truth? Don't take yourself too seriously. Your life is very important, is quite insignificant. And forget it. Now, what makes life so miserable? Second noble truth. Desires. Our desire for permanence, our desire for happiness, our desire for a self that will remain unchanging. In the past few years, I've published many books. And it's interesting when you write and you publish, you devote yourself to a book for about 2 years, then you send it to the publisher. They send you back some comments, you revise your writing, you send it back, and then in the mail comes this big box, and then you get 20 of your books for free. And you look at them, you're happy. And then for some strange reason, you just throw them on the side. And you say, okay, what am I going to do now? Desires. Let's talk about desires now. We've talked about this plenty of times, but let's do it again. There is nothing wrong with you desiring a Tesla. There is nothing wrong with you desiring to go to school to get a PhD. Nothing wrong with you desiring to get married and have children. The first thing you need to understand is the play of the five senses upon our psyche. Maybe some of you in this class are hearing my voice and you desire this class to be over soon. And when you keep nourishing that desire, it turns into anxiety and then frustration. And then you become angry as to why time is moving so slowly. And then you begin to sweat. And then anger turns into rage. And every time you look at me and hear my voice, you want to puke. And then once it turns to 8:30, you pack your stuff, you're about to go. You say, let's continue. Now you're enraged. Your five senses are there for one reason: to make the world outside attractive to you in some shape or form. You see something, it fancies you. You hear something, it fancies you. I'll tell you a story. Some years ago, we were at a gathering, and it's usually the same people. It used to be, not anymore, because we've lost touch with everyone. Partly because of the pandemic. The other part is because we're all getting older, and so it's more difficult to hang out with others. There was this couple who entered our friend's house. His name Ali Husseiniun. She was Persian. She was married to an American, Caucasian, i.e. white. And she had lost touch to some extent with the culture. So we had some food, and then there came time for us to play music. So we go and get the stuff from the car. I bring the amplifiers, the microphones, the sitar, the daf, the santur. And then, as our ritual happened to be, we turn off the lights, or at least dim them. Then I play sitar, then I begin to sing. And Persian music, traditional music, is quite sad. And it's sad for many good reasons. And so after about 10-15 minutes of playing and singing, I see this woman slowly crying. 2 hours later, of course, tea is served and the lights are turned on, and this woman, young woman, comes and sits next to me and she says, "Thank you." Again, she's like, she teared a little bit, as though there was nothing. No, for the first time in many, many years, I felt how it feels to be Persian, you see. She doesn't know me, or she didn't know me, she didn't know my experiences, and yet her ears allowed my voice to go inside her. And my voice inspired emotions. And those emotions, to some extent, got rid of her desire to be in control. For the first time, she realized that perhaps she shouldn't have married an American, that though she was a lawyer, that didn't really mean anything. She also became sad through the music. And in sadness, she experienced poverty. She experienced how it feels to be a woman who has nothing going for her, at least for those 2 hours. See, most of us don't have any power to pick and choose what is attractive to our senses. It happens quite naturally. And the desire by itself, to desire anything, you need mental energy to think about it. And there is nothing wrong with desiring. It's just having the right desires. There is nothing wrong with going to school. Take the right classes. But to do that, you need to know what you're good at. But to do that, you need to figure out what things are bad for you. You need to have a good amount of regret. You must have wasted a good amount of time. You can't just figure things out. All of us in this class are like the prodigal son. We make mistakes. Some profound, with devastating consequences. So the mere fact that we are human beings means that whether you want to or not, you will desire things. Desire will turn into a want. When a desire becomes a want, you spend more mental energy, more emotional energy, more physical energy on that desire. When the want turns into a need, now you have an emotional relationship with the object of desire. Now your entanglement begins. There is, again, this man named Jean-Paul Sartre, the French philosopher, who argues that all of us in this class are free to be responsible for our emotions. We have choices. Sartre argues that a desire comes to you. You have a choice of either turning it into a want or just letting it go. You may be foolish enough to make the desire morph it from a want, from basically a thing of interest to a want. But you have the power to keep it from turning into a need. So when you go to your husband, to your wife, to your companion, say, "I'm sorry, I'm in love with someone else," your husband or your companion can look at you and say, "You had a choice of stopping yourself. There is nothing wrong with being attracted to another. There is even nothing wrong with wanting another. But needing, you could have walked away. You could have not replied to the text, to the email. You could have stopped yourself from calling. You had a choice. Now, what happens when we desire? When it turns from a want into a need, and then you begin to pursue it. There was a tennis player named Bjorn Borg. From the age 5 or 6, he picked up a racket and he continued playing tennis until the age of 25, I think, or 26. For about 20 years, that was the only thing he knew. That was the only world in which he lived. His only desire was to become really good, and he did become good. He was number 1 for about 4 or 5 years. And he lost to John McEnroe at Wimbledon, and then he lost to John McEnroe at US Open in 1981. And he lost his number 1 ranking. And he retired from the sport. He left his wife. He left his coach. He began dating. He began just having fun with life. Then he got really, really depressed. Then he did drugs. Then he tried to commit suicide. This is what happens when you and I are unfocused. When we want too many things. Bjorn Borg, just a regular man, he was good at tennis. Good for him. He was free for about 20 years. He just wanted to be good at tennis, and he was. And then he lost his way for a number of years, and now he's back in the sport. What is it that you and I desire? Go back to our conversation about desires that are below the navel. Physical passions or desires. Go to the desires that come from the belly, power. Go to the desires that live in the chest area, relationships. And what we are told by this kid, Siddhartha, is the following. If you desire passions of the body, you will be disappointed. If you desire money, political power, social power, you will eventually become disappointed. If you desire relationships, eventually you will be disappointed. Remember, you pursue things for one reason. Because they beautify your life. They bring you joy, pleasure, happiness. And what the Buddha says, when you have such desires, what's waiting for you is boredom, is dissatisfaction. I know right now this class is making you tired. First, your body is meant to move around. Don't blame me. You're condemned by your own flesh and bones. Second, human mind is designed to be active. This class bores you. It's not my fault you signed up for this class. You're the foolish entity. Because you were motivated by getting 3 units and getting an A or B or C. You put yourself in this situation, not me. Now, you can suffer your boredom with dignity or just being childish. You could pretend that you're awake. You pretend that you're interested. But remember, you are miserable because you desired this class and you desired it for the wrong reasons. And you have a great Buddha sitting next to you, Jane. She is the embodiment of a married woman and a mother. That's the chest area. She desired all the things that most of you young women in this class desire. And if you catch her in private, the right moment, she'll tell you. It's beautiful in books. Not in real life. Remember, people, this is not for us. This is just gossip. The teachings of the Buddha is really not for us modern people. First, we don't have the passion. Second, we are far too fearful of our future, so we have no choice but to do what we do. Yeah?
Why don't we have a choice?
In what?
You said we're too fearful to have a choice for what we do. We're too fearful of our futures to have a choice for what we do. So what would...
In regards to pursuing the Four Noble Truths.
Or any spiritual path, for that matter.
Well, you weren't here on Wednesday, so let me just give you a brief recap. The Buddha lived in a community 3,000 years ago, Siddhartha. He didn't suffer loneliness. He didn't throw temper tantrums. It wasn't allowed way back then. He was not depressed. He loved his parents. They loved him. He had money, so there was no financial issues. He had a wife, so he didn't have problems with sex. He didn't have problems with loneliness. He was also a father. He was quite wholesome.